Hi, welcome to Vanished Vail, the monthly series where we take you to Vail's special places. Now normally I'm behind the camera making the episodes, but this month I wanted to tell you about how my family came to Vail and the special place that we called home for a long time, Rocky Top. My great-grandparents were Albert and Amanda Holderbaum. They were originally from Oklahoma, but like so many, during the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl, they were driven west in search of a new life. Eventually, they ended up in Tucson. Now, they lived in Tucson running a nursery for many years, but they always dreamed of owning a homestead out in the country. Before my grandmother passed away, she was interviewed about her parents coming out to Vail to build their homestead out in the Empire Mountains. I'm going to turn it over to Momo and have her tell the rest of that story.
In the winter of 1971-72, Albert decided that he wanted to look for some land to retire to. He had spent the past 37 years as a nurseryman and having a nursery of his own in Tucson, and he was ready to retire. I went with him and my children. We went with them as they looked for land. First place he looked was out in the Tortolitas, which is very pretty, but also there was a problem with water out there. So then we started going on picnics on Sunday afternoons, just looking for land, and he decided to drive back down to the Empire Mountains. And we found signs out there that the land the ranch was being broken up, and it was being sold into 5-acre plots by Weaver's Realty. To tell you how rough the road was, because it was a state road, unimproved. We were on a picnic out there and he hit a rock and punched a hole in the gas tank. One of my sons happened to be chewing bubble gum, and that's what he plugged the hole up in the gas tank for us to get back to Tucson. But they loved the land out there. There wasn't anyone else living out there. They bought 5 acres and came back up to Tucson, put their house immediately on the market, and it sold right away. So they ended up with just 1 month to close down their business and move out of their house and get something out there for them to live in. Albert named his 5 acres Rocky Top because it's solid rock out there. As you drive on and it's still an unimproved state road, as you drive on it, rocks just constantly work their way up. And a lot of them are boulders, they're not just plain rocks. Old man Hilton, who was the son of the man who had started the Hilton Ranch in the 1880s, still had the ranch, but his wife had insisted that they move out of the mountains. So they lived down on 83, closer to I-10. But every day, old man Hilton would drive his old pickup over that mountain down to his ranch headquarters. And when he saw Albert starting to build there, he stopped to visit with him. And until he died a couple of years later, they visited, my dad and old man Hilton visited a lot. But he told my dad, "You picked out a good lot. This is a good level one, and this is where I used to have my goat pens." So he said, "You've got a real good lot here." By the 1st of May, Albert had built 1 room out of wood, and that was what they lived in. And they cooked on a camp stove. They hauled water from my house in Tucson, and they had an ice chest for food. And they built an outdoor privy. For those of you who don't know what a privy is, that's a toilet. And they used it for several years before the house was finished. I'd say by Thanksgiving of '72, he was ready to put on the trusses on the house. So all the family went out there, and my daughter, Jerry Jean, drug her boyfriend, and my sons, her boyfriend, all helped my dad put the trusses on the house. By then, he had enlarged it so it was 40 by 40. And to think about what you have to go through to get a house built now, what he did was he took a piece of art paper and drew his house just what he wanted, just plain. I still have a copy of it. And went down to the county. They looked at it and says, okay, that's fine. Gave him his permit. And that's what he built his house off of. And they were still hauling water. They had a well, but they did not have electricity yet. He had called for a water witch from Benson to come and tell him where he could dig for water. And I kind of laughed at that, so I called geologists down at the U of A, and they laughed at me and told me there was no way to tell where water was. Well, the water witch found the water. It seems like I remember he paid $50 to the water witch. And the well ended up being about 535 feet deep, and they hit water at under 400 feet. And it was beautiful, wonderful, sweet water. And they were the only ones who lived out there in that area for about 3 years. One other family had built a house out above them against the mountains, but they only came out about every other weekend. It was the Maldonados. So for about 3 years, they were the only ones who lived there. And then another family, and then gradually another family came in. They didn't think they'd be able to have TV out there, so they gave me their TV. So I had 2 TVs. But all of a sudden, we met somebody who lived down on 83 who was able to get the TV stations. So we took the TV back out there, and they got all 3 stations when they got electricity. At that time, TEP put in the electricity. You just had to pay from your property line in. Now they're paying thousands of dollars to get lines put in, but in I think it was 73, that was all they had to pay. The house wasn't finished probably for another couple years. I'm going to say maybe by 75 that the house was finished, a 2-bedroom, finally an indoor bathroom. But if you wanted to reach anybody, get any messages, you had to mail them a letter, or you had to use smoke signals, because there were no telephones out there. When we contacted Mountain Bell, the story was if you can get, and I think it was 15 families, to give us $10,000 apiece, we'll put a line in out there. And that was in the mid-70s. So there just was no way. To get to their house, you had to cross about a mile of state land, and it went through a wash. And when there were hard rains, and in particular in 1983, on October 3rd and 4th, there was such horrible rains that the road was moved and the wash was moved. My mother, Amanda, had come in town, and it was 5 days before she could cross the wash to get back out there. So my dad was stuck on the house side, and my mother was stuck on the Tucson side for 5 days. And you just don't think of that happening in the 20th century, that you can't get around. Christmas of '72, we celebrated Christmas out there. The building was built, but there was no floor. So the Christmas tree was set up on gravel in the living room, and he had his fireplace built. And it was built, the fireplace is built from an artist's viewpoint. Every rock had its spot to go into the fireplace wall.
When I was 6 years old, my family moved back to Arizona. And when we got here, we moved out to Rocky Top, to Vail. And that's where we spent our first year here in Vail. In that first year, we had our first Arizona Christmas. Now, I had grown up in places like Alaska that have a lot of snow. And for me, Christmas was a time full of pine trees and snow everywhere. And so Christmas didn't look like I had expected. And it wasn't what I was expecting. And I didn't think that it would be a great Christmas because of that. But my mom made Christmas happen out of nothing. We decorated the house. We took a century plant, covered it in lights. We had a fire going. We had presents. We had our family. And there on the orange shag carpet of Rocky Top, we had a great first Christmas. Now this year has been really tough for a lot of us. And COVID-19 means that none of us are going to have the same Christmas we had last year. But the great thing that I learned that first Christmas is that even if you're going to have an experience that doesn't feel normal, that doesn't feel like it was in the past, doesn't mean it's not going to be a great Christmas. The great thing is that each year we get to make and remake our traditions and our holidays. And so this year, we're not going to be able to celebrate the same way we used to, but it can still be full of joy, and we can still spend it, maybe virtually, with the people we love. I hope your holidays are happy and joyful, and I can't wait to meet up with you again next year for another Vanished Vail. Until next time.